Hello everyone, my name is Ishan and I'd like to welcome you all to the COVID-19 Response and Recovery Lecture Series. I would also like to welcome you to INS, that stands for Ich San. INS is Australia's first multilingual dialogue and research centre, focusing on constructive mechanisms through both scholarly literature and on-field application and experiences. I would also like to welcome you to Lecture 9. This Lecture 9 analyzes the effect on Australian retail and hospitality sector due to the COVID-19 restrictions in Australia. Australia has seen more than 300,000 business closures each year. The retail sector has seen, however, no fewer than 114 prominent company collapses and thousands of stores closed their doors from 2001 to 2019. It tells us that out of all the business closures, the retail sector is not one that gets highly affected, and that's the usual trend. Also, 5% of franchise businesses operate in the retail and hospitality sector. So if we consider the franchises, not it's not a significant portion of all the franchises that operate in this particular retail and hospitality sector. It's just 5%. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced a staggering 70% of businesses in the hospitality sector to reduce the hours of their staff and 43% to either sack their workers or place them on unpaid leave. So this has been the effect at the moment. Also, two-thirds of businesses across all sectors have reported taking a hit to revenue or cash flow due to COVID-19. 2 in 5 businesses said that they had changed how they delivered goods or services. 1/3 said they had renegotiated their leases, and 1 in 4 had deferred their loan repayments. About 1 in 10 said that they had paused trading altogether. In 70% of the cases, this was just because of COVID-19. We have also seen reduced work hours that were reported by 25% of businesses with 19 employees or less, 41% by those with 20 to 199 workers, and 34% of those with 200 or more employees. Now, nowhere was this impact or this particular situation more apparent than in the hospitality sector. Among the affected are mainly casual workers, since casual workers form nearly a quarter. So that's almost 25% of Australia's workforce, with 2.6 million casual employments. Accommodation services were affected as well because business travelers, interstate travels, or even tourism, all of these were shut down. While some accommodation services continued, they continued their business as usual despite not having any customers. They just went empty. But about 78% of accommodation and food service businesses had already made changes to respond to this particular change. And the changes they made were in their workforce, including 70% of temporarily reduced work hours. Now, about 43% said they had placed their staff on unpaid leave, including standing them down, and 29% said they had put their staff on a paid leave. Now, during this crisis, the issues faced by the retail and hospitality sector were having decreased sales of non-essential items, such as maybe luxury food, gifts, cutlery, all these within the retail outlets. An added challenge was paying for hand sanitizer stations and additional cleaning staff to undertake the necessary recommended additional cleaning recommended by the local governments. While bigger retail giants managed to cope with the situation like Coles or Woolworths because of their increase in the sales, due to the revenue they received due to panic buying, it was the smaller retail outlets that did not benefit much from this particular panic buying. Instead, they were additionally burdened with the reduction of their customer base who was heading off to the bigger brands. Most of the shoppers were locally residing buyers, as people were not allowed to leave their suburbs during the level 3 lockdown restrictions. Stocking and shelving expenditures on perishable non-essentials such as maybe avocados, dragon fruits, and more expensive lifestyle food became a big challenge. There were also disruptions in the supply chain and contracts, especially imported goods, which included both perishable and non-perishable items. The hospitality sector also received a major hit due to indoor dining being banned and only takeaway food being allowed. Usually, restaurants don't mind the membership fees and the delivery fees by Uber Eats and other delivery apps, as they make enough money by the increase in the volume of indoor diners. But with the indoor diners being banned and the only dependence being that of providing food under Uber Eats or maybe other food delivery services, restaurants started facing a revenue crisis. Hotels also struggled with the lack of business travelers and the lack of tourists. Internal tourists were also decreased significantly as people were not allowed to travel interstate or even beyond their suburbs. Now, despite this situation, all the retail outlets or all hotels did not shut down. Only a few shut down. And now we are going to have a little economics angle to understand in which situations do these retail outlets or these restaurants actually take the decision to shut down. So let's have a look at a few technicalities with regards to economics. We have tried to understand what the problem was and what exactly was affected and what the challenges were. But now let's see exactly on what grounds, at what particular situation or what point do these particular outlets or these particular hotels or restaurants decide they really want to shut down business. It's not really possible to continue the business. And for that, we need to understand this diagram. So we got our a situation of a perfect competition, a perfectly competitive market in which, of course, we have a marginal revenue, our demand, our average revenue, and our selling price all the same, because in a perfect competition, you have individual businesses which are price takers, they're not price makers, and the products are pretty similar to each other. We have our regular average total cost curve over here, and we got a marginal cost curve over here going upwards as well. Now, what we're going to see is a situation in which a firm makes a loss and a situation in which a firm decides to exit the market altogether. So what we'll do is we'll draw this together, increase this up here, take this line up here, extend this because I'm extending it because this is the profit maximizing output. So at that particular output over here, the selling price is this circle, but now we need to see what is the cost price, and we can derive the cost price for this particular profit maximizing output by deriving it from the average total cost curve. So let's check where the average total cost curve takes us. It takes us here. So what we find this point here, that is going to be our cost price, all right? So what we can see is this is cost price, and this is the selling price for many of these businesses in a not so ideal situation. So this region in the middle is the loss that they're facing. And typically in a situation like this COVID-19, a lot of these businesses are facing this particular loss in their businesses, in their revenue. Now, the question here is why isn't each and every business making a loss exiting the market? And the reason is pretty simple. Actually, you see, loss doesn't necessarily happen because you're not making enough money. Okay, loss is calculated before it's everything before basically you reach the break-even point. So at the beginning of your business, your startup cost could be pretty high, your setup cost could be pretty high, your initial fixed cost could be pretty high, and these would include the purchase of a particular place, land, the purchase of the business, purchase of the restaurant, purchase of the expensive equipment, paying for the licenses and the permits, setting up the furniture inside, actually building the physical place as well. So all these are going to be your initial startup fixed costs, which would be pretty high, and it would take a lot of businesses a couple of years to overcome that initial fixed cost itself. Now, on a regular basis, we would see that our total cost is made up of the fixed cost and various variable costs. Now, variable costs are the costs that fluctuate, that change on a regular basis, that are not fixed. And most of the times, these are your operational costs. So, what happens in this situation is although we are not making enough to overcome the total cost incurred, it's mostly because significant amount of that cost is coming from the fixed cost. So it's difficult for many businesses to overcome it. And that's when their profit and loss statements would actually show the businesses running a loss. Now, the problem that really arises and the situation in which businesses decide it's not viable to continue, it's actually better to shut down and exit the market, is when this particular point, this ATC, is not ATC. Instead, if we are looking at the average variable cost. So instead of the average total cost, you know what average total cost is made up of? Average total cost is made up of your average fixed cost and your average variable cost. And as I explained, the fixed cost part is pretty high most of the times. Variable cost, however, is the ongoing operational cost. So what if this particular curve was not ATC? Instead, this particular curve was your average variable cost itself. Then we would see, and that would actually mean that our marginal revenue is not enough. It's not even exceeding our average variable cost. It means the average variable cost is more than your average revenue. So that's a situation we don't want, where average variable cost is greater than your average revenue. It literally means, in layman's term, it literally means your business is not making enough money to even pay for the daily wages, even to pay for the day-to-day operational cost of the business. That's a crisis situation. And if that situation hits any of these businesses due to the COVID-19 pandemic, they are taking the decisions to shut down permanently. And we have seen that with a lot of retail outlets. Now, of course, at the start of the lecture, I said how out of the total business shutdowns, the retail and the hospitality shutdown is not that significant. However, everyone who faces the crisis, for that person, for that business, it is significant, of course, because their livelihood depends on those particular businesses. A lot of jobs depend on those businesses as well. And all this does cause a domino effect in the economy. So any shutdown does affect the economy, either at a small level or a higher level, but the effect is still there. And when the average variable cost exceeds the average revenue, that's when most of the businesses decide to shut down. When I was walking through a few shopping centers when it was allowed, because we have a few Kohl's or Woolworths, retail outlets within the shopping centers, we could actually see a few stores saying they are temporarily shutting down and they will be back in business. And that is because they were not able to gain that revenue to keep the operations going. If they had continued, they would incur a significant loss, which would actually lead them to shut down permanently. There were a few shops open who were okay in running a loss because probably their average revenues were still greater than the average variable cost instead of the average total cost. So they might be having a loss, but it wasn't a dire situation where they would have to shut down. Well, as few stores had voluntarily shut down, some of them said they're shutting down permanently as well. And that shows us the internal side of the microeconomics of the situation where the average variable cost exceeds the average revenue. So with that, I would like to end this particular lecture. Thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed. If you have some ideas, some comments, some questions, or some thoughts, please write them on the Facebook or the YouTube comment section. And also, please don't forget to like and subscribe to this particular YouTube channel. There are a lot of exciting projects lined up, a lot of discussions, a lot of interviews and dialogue sessions lined up for 2021. And if you would like to participate in them from your homes as an audience, make sure you like and subscribe this particular channel. So I'll see you in the next video, in the next lecture. Thank you very much.